Night fell over the plantation like a blanket too heavy for the body. In southern Louisiana, where the air is thick and silence is never complete, darkness never comes alone. It brings sounds with it, the distant croaking of frogs, the slow rustle of ancient trees, and above all the low, constant growling coming from the kennel behind the big house. Guard dogs didn't sleep there. They watched. Always. In 1872, on that isolated plantation, the dogs were more feared than the whip. They didn't bark for fun. They were trained to recognize the scent of fear, to run through the dark, to take bodies down, before a scream could even form in the throat, and the one who took care of them was Elias. Elias was the kind of man the plantation owner barely noticed. Thin, quiet, eyes always lowered, steps careful. To the master of the house, he was nothing more than another slave, too old for the fields and too young to die, so they gave him the dogs. A dirty, lonely, dangerous job. Feeding, cleaning, containing. The owner believed it was the perfect punishment. Anyone who spends their days among teeth and chains learns their place quickly. What he never understood was that dogs learn from whoever is present, and Elias was always there. Every morning before the sun came up, Elias walked to the kennel with the same precise routine. The creak of the wooden door, the metallic sound of chains, the strong smell of raw meat mixed with mud and rust. The dogs watched him in silence. They didn't growl at him, they never did. The master noticed it once, thought it was curious. He laughed and said even the animals knew who was in charge. Elias didn't answer. He kept filling the bowls calmly, always using the same hand, the same rhythm. Animals like predictability. They trust it. What the master never saw was what happened afterward, when the yard was empty, when the big house shut its windows. Elias sat on the ground leaning against the fence and spoke to them. Not kind words, not promises, just low, steady sounds. A tone that didn't command, only affirmed presence. The dogs learned quickly. They learned his scent, his footsteps, his breathing. They learned that this thin man was the only one who never came with pain. The plantation owner, on the other hand, always came with anger. He stomped his boots, he shouted, he used the whip even on the animals. He liked to show who was in control. The dogs obeyed him, that much was true. But obedience is not the same as loyalty. That summer, escapes increased. Always at night, always near the swamp. The master began to suspect someone was helping, that someone knew how to avoid the dogs. He was right, but not in the way he imagined. Elias never unlocked chains, never opened gates. He only did small things, adjusted schedules, changed positions, let the dogs feel the wind before they saw a silhouette. Sometimes he didn't call them back. Animals follow instinct, but they also follow habit. And the habit Elias built was simple. He was the safe point. Everything that wasn't him was a threat. The night everything changed began like any other. Suffocating heat, a heavy sky, no stars. The master ate late and drank more than he should have. He was irritated. He had lost money. He had lost men. And he needed to take it out on someone. He went to the kennel alone. That never happened. He liked an audience for his cruelty. That night he wanted silence. He wanted to hear nothing but the sound of fear. Elias was there, standing still, head lowered. The dogs alert, unmoving, eyes glowing in the dark. The master cursed, spat Elias's name like an insult, raised the whip. That's when something imperceptible happened. Elias took a step back, a small step, almost respectful. But it was enough. The dogs noticed. For the first time, they stood between Elias and the plantation owner. They didn't bark. They didn't attack. They just stood there, a silent line of tense bodies and exposed teeth. The master laughed, thought it was funny, took another step forward. And that night, for the first time, the dogs didn't recognize who was standing on the other side. The master was still laughing when he realized something was wrong. The laugh came out short, cut off halfway, as if it had hit something invisible. The dogs didn't move, but their bodies leaned forward, muscles tight, ears low. They weren't looking at Elias, they were looking at him. "Get out of the way," the master ordered, snapping the whip through the air. The sharp crack sliced the night, but it didn't have its usual effect. No retreat, no barking, just the heavy silence and the sound of the animals breathing, low, steady, in sync. A chill ran up the master's spine. It wasn't fear yet. It was something more insulting, confusion. Those dogs had known him since they were puppies. They had been trained to obey his voice, his scent, his presence. None of this made sense. He took another step. The final mistake is usually small, a casual movement, a gesture repeated 1,000 times before, never with consequences. But that night the step was understood differently. One of the dogs growled, low, controlled. It wasn't a warning for Elias, it was a warning for him. The master raised his arm to strike again. The whip never came down. The dogs lunged together, not like wild beasts but like something organized, deliberate. There was no chaos, no immediate screaming. There was impact, the sound of a body hitting hard ground, boots scraping, air forced out of lungs all at once. Elias didn't move. He stayed where he was, leaning against the fence, watching. His eyes showed no satisfaction, no anger, just focus. He knew that moment wasn't about violence, it was about consequence. The master tried to scream. The sound came out muffled, swallowed by the night and the weight of bodies on him. The dogs didn't attack the way they'd been trained to attack runaways. They didn't tear, they restrained, as if they knew exactly how much was enough. The difference between attack and punishment is intention, and that night the intention wasn't to kill quickly, it was to stop. The struggle didn't last long enough for breath to run out, for strength to fail, for arrogance to understand, too late, that something had changed. When everything went quiet again, the dogs backed away slowly. They didn't flee, they didn't celebrate, they simply sat down again, alert, the way they always did after finishing a task. The master's body lay on the ground, breathing with difficulty. The whip rested just inches from his hand. He tried to reach it. None of the dogs moved. They didn't need to. The collective stare was enough. That's when Elias stepped forward. Slowly, each step measured. He crouched beside the man who for years had spoken too loudly and listened too little. "They know who takes care of them," Elias said, his voice low, almost respectful. There was no threat in it, just a statement of fact. The master tried to answer. The words wouldn't form. What came out was weak, unrecognizable. Fear, when it arrives late, paralyzes more than any chain. Elias stood and gave a short whistle, a simple sound. The dogs obeyed immediately, retreating to the back of the kennel. Chains clinked as he secured them again. Everything returned to its place, except power. By morning, the plantation woke up different. The body was found still alive, but broken enough to never walk the same way again, never shout the same way again, never raise the whip the same way again. The story that spread was simple, an accident, a lapse. The dogs went crazy, they said. These things happen with animals. Elias kept caring for them. Nothing changed in his routine, the same hours, the same rhythm, the same tone of voice. But something had been set that night, an invisible line. The master never went to the kennel alone again. In fact, he never went anywhere without an escort. Even then, he avoided passing near the dogs, avoided passing near Elias. Months later, he was sold. The plantation changed hands. New owner, new rules. Elias stayed. Men like him always stay, because they know too much to be easily discarded. The dogs grew old under his care. They died one by one, peacefully, buried near the swamp where the wind blew steadily. Not one of them ever bit Elias. Years later, when people asked about that night, Elias would only say that animals recognize who treats them as living beings and who treats them as tools, and tools, when they break, are thrown away. The former owner died much later, in a comfortable bed but trapped inside his own body. He never slept in the dark again, never stayed alone with silence again. Some said he still woke up screaming, calling for the dogs. Others said he dreamed of glowing eyes in the night. No one knew for sure, no one cared enough to ask. Elias never told the whole story. He didn't need to. Justice, when it's silent, doesn't need witnesses. Because on that plantation, on that night, no one killed anyone directly. Nature simply responded to the way it had been treated. And sometimes, the most lasting revenge doesn't come from hands. It comes from habit, patience, and the certainty that even dogs know when power no longer deserves obedience.